The message that shook everyone. The narrator explains that the video opens with confusion, not chaos, not yelling, silence. The kind that feels heavy, the kind that makes people uneasy. Viewers hear that a disturbing message had surfaced, allegedly connected to Diddy, and it wasn't just strange, it was deeply unsettling. The narrator stresses that this wasn't gossip pulled from nowhere. This was something that made grown men stop talking and start crying. Day 26 members are shown visibly shaken. Their reactions feel raw, unfiltered. The narrator points out that when people who've survived the industry look scared, it means something crossed a line. The message reportedly referenced dark ideas that no one wanted to repeat out loud. That alone set off alarms. The narrator emphasizes how quickly the tone shifts from curiosity to concern. This isn't entertainment anymore. This is trauma resurfacing. The group's discomfort isn't performative, it's instinctive. The narrator reminds viewers that fear like this doesn't come from rumors, it comes from memory. And the moment viewers realize that, the video takes a turn that can't be undone. But that was only the beginning.
Q's long silence finally breaks. The narrator explains that Q wasn't someone who spoke recklessly. For years, he avoided going deep. He deflected, he laughed things off, he changed subjects. The narrator notes how viewers are shown clips where Q looks uncomfortable anytime Diddy's name comes up. His body language says more than his words ever did. Then the shift happens. In recent interviews, the mask cracks. The narrator describes how Q's voice changes. His confidence drops. He doesn't look angry, he looks overwhelmed. The narrator points out that this isn't someone chasing attention. This is someone reliving something they never processed. Viewers are told that Q repeatedly says he only wanted one thing, an apology, closure. Not revenge, not money, just acknowledgement. The narrator emphasizes how powerful that detail is. People who are lying usually want control. People who are hurting want peace. As Q speaks, his pain feels unresolved, heavy, lingering. The narrator explains that this moment reframes everything viewers thought they knew about his past behavior. And what he shared next changed the entire story.
The narrator carefully walks viewers through Q's account, without sensationalizing it. He explains that Q believed he was in a trusted space, with familiar people, with someone he loved. The narrator highlights that trust is the key theme here. Q didn't expect danger, he expected connection. Then, the pill enters the story. The narrator makes it clear this is where confusion begins. What Q thought he was taking and what actually happened don't seem to match. Viewers hear that Q blacked out, lost time, woke up disoriented. The narrator emphasizes how terrifying that is for anyone, especially when memory doesn't return. The room, the people, the laughter, none of it makes sense to him. The narrator explains that Q doesn't describe specifics, he describes feelings, violation, panic, fear. That absence of detail isn't suspicious, it's common with trauma. The narrator then explains how Q says his life never felt the same afterward. His thoughts changed, his mental health spiraled. And viewers are left realizing that this wasn't a bad night, it was a breaking point. But the story didn't stop with him.
Don Richard's name enters the storm. The narrator explains that Dawn's involvement wasn't originally public. It surfaced gradually, carefully. Q didn't rush to name her. When her name did come up, it complicated everything. The narrator explains how Dawn denied all accusations outright, firmly, publicly. Her statement was polished, legal-sounding, calm. The narrator contrasts that with Q's emotional delivery. One sounds rehearsed, the other sounds fractured. Viewers are told that Dawn's defense raised questions instead of ending them. The narrator points out inconsistencies people online noticed, timelines that didn't fully line up, details she seemed to know without being prompted. The narrator stresses that none of this proves guilt, but it fuels doubt, especially when her statement disappears shortly after being posted. The narrator explains how silence can sometimes speak louder than denial, and how quickly the narrative shifted once others began defending her on her behalf. Viewers are left questioning who was protecting whom. And then the bigger picture started coming into focus. The narrator widens the lens. This isn't just about Q anymore, or Dawn, or Day 26. This is about an industry pattern. Viewers are reminded of the Cassie lawsuit and the flood of allegations that followed. The narrator explains how the documentary footage and court testimonies created a backdrop that made Q's story harder to dismiss. Similar themes kept repeating: control, fear, silence, power imbalance. The narrator stresses that when multiple stories echo each other without coordination, people start listening. The narrative around Diddy begins shifting from untouchable mogul to heavily scrutinized figure. The narrator explains that this moment feels like a dam breaking, years of whispers turning into conversations, conversations turning into public reckoning, and Q's story lands right in the middle of it. But there was still one disturbing rumor people couldn't shake. The narrator explains that long-time industry rumors resurfaced fast. Stories about recordings, about leverage, about control through fear. The narrator is careful to say these are allegations, not proven facts, but they didn't come out of nowhere. Viewers hear that many artists believed cameras were everywhere, that nothing stayed private. The narrator explains how fear keeps people compliant longer than contracts ever could. This context reframes Q's behavior over the years, his silence, his loyalty, his hesitation. The narrator emphasizes how power works best when it doesn't need to be used openly, just implied. And once viewers understand that dynamic, Q's fear makes sense. But the real cost shows up in his life today. American brings the focus back to Q as a human being, not a headline, not a clip, a person. Viewers are told about his mental health diagnoses, his treatment, his struggles to regain stability. The narrator emphasizes that trauma doesn't end when the cameras turn off. It lingers. It reshapes identity, relationships, self-trust. The narrator explains that Q doesn't claim to have all the answers. He's still searching, still healing, and that vulnerability is what makes his story resonate. This isn't about proving anything. It's about surviving something. Which leaves viewers with one final question. The narrator closes by addressing the audience directly. No accusations, no conclusions, just questions. Was Dawn another victim of the same system, or did she play a role in harming someone else? Can both be true at once? The narrator reminds viewers that power corrupts differently at every level. Some people are trapped, some adapt, some participate. The truth isn't always clean. The narrator encourages viewers to think critically instead of choosing sides emotionally, to recognize patterns without erasing nuance, and to remember that stories like this don't exist for entertainment. They exist because someone finally felt safe enough to speak.